Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hello.
Welcome to our Port Haven StreamCast. Center our regular day and time again. Look at us
Woo!
being all
Mm,
fancy
mm,
and
mm.
punctual.
So punctual.
That's how we do.
Let's do a
Um,
quick chat check with chat. Can we hear Django this week?
my microphone says it's working, but OBS likes to do OBS things whenever it wants sometimes. Um,
Well, Echo 7, aka Solo Pirate, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I yeah. I think you know more so than a lot of people who I was talking about behind that video.
Roger, Roger. Um, But as you hopefully saw, if you're joining, it should be telling you this periodically. But and it's right there in the title too. But we're going to be talking Solo
Yep.
today. So if you've not seen Solo, and don't want to have things spoiled for you, this is your exit ramp.
Yep.
This is where you show yourself
Nope.
to one of our other videos. One of
Take
our
the
other videos.
Yep.
Make sure.
Yep. Take the Kessel Run right out of here. You can go to last week's Streamcast where we did not talk about Solo.
This is true.
That would always be a good option. There should be a list of past Dreamcasts in the description.
Yep. So as we talk about this, we're just going to kind of ramble through our thoughts about the movie. But if you do hear something that sort of strikes your fancy, or if you've got something that you want to address specifically, or a question that you would like for us to answer, then make sure you drop it in the chat, and we will try to get as many of those as we can as we go through, just to make sure we want to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about Solo. I will also say that if you have not seen already, we do have both a spoiler-free review and a non-spoiler free review, so a spoiler review, I guess. I don't know how English works today. That
Doing
Yodar made.
talking.
Yes, I'm doing all the talking with the words, the best words. I have all the words.
It's all good. I'm just sitting over here leaking from my nose.
Oh.
So.
But so if you haven't checked those out, you can look at that as well. So you can get kind of our general review. But
Yeah.
why don't we just start there too? What were your kind of, you've seen it 3 times now, so what have
I
you?
have seen it 3 times.
You've already done a review, so you don't have to
Yeah.
rehash that. But how has it aged for you, having seen it 3 times?
So the third time I saw it, because as you can kind of tell from my Kleenex and from some of my other videos, I've been ill. So the third time I saw it, had consumed so much water and juice, I had to go to the bathroom like halfway through the movie, and I couldn't think of a scene I wanted to miss, even though I had seen it before. So like, even on the third viewing, there was no point in the movie that had gotten boring enough to me where I would be sad if I missed 90 seconds of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty good statement towards it. It's fun, and I've said this in a couple of tweets, and I've said this other places, I think, but it's that it can be, it's very much like A New Hope in this way, that it can be a fun popcorn flick movie. It can be a movie you don't have to think about, and you can just sit back and enjoy.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be. Like, it can be a movie you get a lot of meaning. Like, there's several videos about Solo I want to make that I just haven't gotten around to yet, pulling meaning and emotion out. But you don't have to. Like, you can think about this movie exactly as much as you want to think about this movie.
Right. I mean, and I think for me, specifically, it was that. Like, the one thing that I struggled with, honestly, when I saw the film, and I've only seen it once, but the one thing that I struggled with is that I have gotten like so preemptively defensive on behalf of Star Wars these days, especially after The Last Jedi, that like I felt like I watched the whole movie trying to wait for the thing that was going to bother people.
Right.
Um and so like I was like on edge the whole time, and it kind of kept me from it, but even with that, I really enjoyed it. I liked the pacing of the film. I liked the plot of the film. I liked the characterizations, and we can talk about any of this at length.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it, and I feel like it was a different type of enjoyment than Rogue One was, if we want to compare
Yep.
it that way. Rogue One did different things for me um, than Solo did, but as much as I loved Rogue One, Solo I think was more fun for me.
Yes.
I don't
Oh
know.
yeah.
I don't know if that means that I enjoy it more, or I like it better, but it was more fun. But it
Well,
wasn't just fun, and just fun was what I was anticipating.
right. Well, I mean, it's more fun in that it doesn't end with everyone dying. So
Well,
that's
yeah.
that's the first thing it did to be more enjoyable, I think. Um, well, yeah, I know what you mean, and at some level, I had that anticipation with Solo
Hmm.
about being afraid of like what people weren't going to like. I actually weirdly got that when I was watching, sorry, The Last Jedi. I remember being very confident I was going to like The Last Jedi,
Hmm.
and then literally as soon as I saw a long time ago, I had that moment like from fanboys where it was like, "Hey guys, what if the movie sucks?" Um,
Right.
and I like started to panic, and then I panicked the entire time I watched The Last Jedi for the first time, which is part of why I couldn't enjoy it. So I think with Solo, I'd kind of gotten that burned out of me, and the fact that most of the kind of negativity towards Solo has been its box office numbers, I think says a lot about how good the movie has been doing.
Right. I mean, and I don't know. We can talk about this too, and I know you've got a whole rant about box office stuff too.
Yeah, I do.
That was even before the film came out, but like I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just not as important to me as like a metric of. I mean, it's a metric of how many people saw a movie. I don't think that's
Right.
necessarily a metric of how enjoyable it was or how good it was.
Right.
And I still point to this. And, Avatar is the highest grossing film of all time. I saw it twice and I thought it sucked both times. Um,
Right.
like I disliked Avatar a lot. But I mean, I don't know. I think there are some lessons to be learned from the box office. Um, Sort of struggles that Solo has had. I think a lot of that comes down to timing. I don't
Yep.
think that it's anything about the film. I think it's
Right.
the timing of the film. Um, both in terms of its proximity to Infinity War, and the lack of hype that it got because of Infinity War. But also, apparently I was looking at this. As much as my instincts would tell me that Memorial Day is a big movie weekend, apparently it's not as big as you might think necessarily. Um,
Right. It probably depends on the weather, to be honest.
Probably. I mean, we were having an impending tropical storm here, so that might have affected things.
Right.
And I think in the long run, I think Solo is going to be fine. I don't
Yeah.
think it's going to be a loss for the studio. Um, but I do think
Well,
there are probably some lessons to be learned for the studio.
I think the first lesson is when you have a movie in May, maybe release a trailer sooner than February,
Right.
because I think that's a big part of it. And I mean, they really just didn't start advertising for Solo until after Infinity War was out. I
Hmm.
think that's a big thing too. A lot of people I talked to didn't see Solo the first weekend, not because they didn't want to, because they didn't even know the movie was out.
Right.
So people aren't going to go to a movie if they don't know the movie's there. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Well, and I think too, I think we will see a general move back to December. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, which is kind of a shame for me, I guess, in a way, because Star Wars used to be a May thing,
Yeah.
You did that video about the anniversaries.
Anniversaries, yeah.
And so for a lot of its tenure was always a May thing for me. And I even said last week I wondered if they would end up moving episode 9 back to May to make it a May thing again. But maybe December just fits better. I don't know. I don't but I was gonna say something else about that. Are there any other things like apart from like the marketing? Because I felt like the marketing was slow to start, but then they like dumped it all at once. Like we were joking about getting a new Solo trailer or scene or all those different things, TV spots, almost like every day.
Right.
Leading up to the film.
Right, but I kind of wonder if that was a little bit too little too late. Because at that point, people, when you start seeing a movie campaign, you're not like, well, it's going to come out in 2 weeks.
Right.
You know what I mean? Even though it kept saying Memorial Day.
Right. But I don't know. I still enjoyed the film. I think the film is good enough to stand on its own. But let me ask you about that too, because we had in our thread on our forums at forums.porthaven.com.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's right there in the chat. A couple messages ago. But in our thread there, somebody was saying that they essentially thought that Solo was missable as a film.
Right.
That it's not essential, I guess, is kind of what they're getting at. That, almost the way I thought about Ant-Man until Civil War came out.
Right.
That it's related but not essential. Or kind of along those same lines, that it didn't do enough to justify its own existence. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, that's something I'd kind of been saying for a while, is that I'd seen a couple of different videos about people who are hoping that Solo wasn't going to be a nostalgia fest. But I said it absolutely was going to be, because what other point is there in making a Solo film?
Yeah.
Right? So Solo is in some ways missable, I guess, because you have to care about Han Solo,
right,
to care about the movie. But it's Han Solo. Most people who are fans of Star Wars are going to want to. And when you have things like that Maul cameo, you kind of got to wonder how much is anything going to end up being missable.
Right. I mean, and I think that was a good instance, too, of even being something that was just a small thing that still has sort of expanded ramifications. Like, it's a thing that's not necessarily essential to the plot of the film. Like, if you didn't know who that was, or if you just missed that minute or two, that would be a big thing to miss. But you still would have understood what was happening, I guess, in that sense. But you're right. It does prove that even this spinoff that doesn't have direct story implications for big plot points, the way that Rogue One did, doesn't necessarily mean that it's completely separate either.
Right. Well, and like to that point, like I was texting with one of my friends who finally saw the movie just this past week, and she didn't even pick up that it was Maul, which surprised me. I thought the lightsaber was almost like playing the hand too much, and even then she didn't think it was Maul, because in her mind Maul was dead. So like the idea that it could be Darth Maul didn't even occur to her. But now she wants to watch the Maul episodes of the Clone Wars with me. But I think it becomes a thing where I think fans can kind of take for granted what people know and what people don't know. And in some ways, I think things then remain missable because, Darth Maul showed up in this, and if there really are 2 more Solo films, or at least 2 more movies that have young Han in it because of Aaron Reich's contracts, he'll probably remain just an important character to those movies, and not an important, like, I don't think he's going to show up in episode 9. But at this point, I never would have told you he's going to show up in Solo. So what do I know? Like,
Right.
I've been saying for a long time, no one should be expecting Ahsoka to ever show up in a movie because why would she? Except for now, if they'll put freaking Maul back in a movie, why would they not put in Ahsoka at this point?
Right. Well, and I'll be honest, I don't know that I even told you this. When I first saw Darth Maul, I was like, "Hey, wait a minute. Like, wait, what?" And like I know the Clone Wars and I know Rebels and I know
Yep.
Son of Dathomir.
Yep.
But then once it sunk in, I'm like, "Oh, this is huge because
Right.
this does tie in. Like it's not huge in that it's I still maintain it's not essential to the film, but
Right.
like it means that the Clone Wars are canon in a bigger way than I think some people are willing to admit.
Yep.
And you know, and I've said all along, and I know you agree with this, you know, that if you like Clone Wars, you know, not Clone Wars, if you like Star Wars,
Yep.
particularly if you're a Lucasfilm or Lucas fan, a fan of George
Right.
Lucas, then the Clone Wars is the most George Lucas Star Wars you're ever gonna get
Yep.
because it's hundreds of episodes that were all
Yep.
either directly involved with Lucas or at
Yep.
least having him executive produce it.
Yep.
Like that was his vision,
Yep.
and to see that
And
play through is important.
and he brought back Maul. I think that's the thing. Like, I kind of thought of, in the Lucas era, would this have ever happened if Lucas was still making Star Wars movies?
Hmm.
And it occurred to me it probably would have, because Lucas put his stamp of approval on having Maul come back anyway. Like,
Right.
that was 100% a thing that if it wasn't George's idea, he at least was really okay with it.
Right.
And I think that's something that just, it enriches so much. And even Ahsoka is George's idea.
Right.
When he started the Clone Wars, he wanted Anakin to have a Padawan learner. That
Right.
was one of his big sticking points. And I don't know. It just, to me, it really opens the doors on what is and isn't a thing. But yeah, that's the thing, is it's so funny to me where I feel like it's the same crowd that wants the Lucas era Star Wars back because they don't like their new canon movies,
Hmm.
but they never watched the Clone Wars, which is also Lucas era Star Wars.
I mean, and I genuinely understand if somebody can't get into an animated show or if an animation style is just not your thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the reason why I've not watched more of Avatar: The Last Airbender because I'm just not into that animation style. Like I understand that. I'm not trying to knock it if it's, I mean, the same thing with comic books. I've heard some people tell me, you know, I'll read books, I just can't do comics because it just doesn't work for them for whatever reason.
Right.
I don't get that personally, but it makes sense to me that a person could be that way. But I just keep going back in my mind to the first thing you texted me after you saw the film was that
Yep.
you felt vindicated.
Yes.
And I
that
feel
was like the only thing I would tell you is I felt vindicated.
and I feel like this is vindication for the Clone Wars and for Rebels.
Yep.
This is this saying this stuff matters. And again,
Yep.
it's not mattering in huge plot point ways, at least not yet. But
Not
just
yet,
the
yeah.
idea that it's not, you know, a lot of fans, particularly these days, are big into like headcanon. Like, you know,
Yep.
for me this counts and for me this doesn't count. And I
Yep.
feel like Clone Wars has been absent of people's headcanon for a lot of people for whatever reason. And this is Lucasfilm saying, you know, maybe not so much. You know, maybe you ought to be paying attention to that. And I'll tell you, the only people that I've seen get upset about it are people that I've known ahead of time did not like the Clone Wars.
Right.
I feel like if you had not already made your mind up about the Clone Wars, people have been open to this. And I can think of at least, I was telling you this yesterday, at least half a dozen people that I
Yep.
know of who have texted me saying, wait, Darth Maul? And I'm like, yep, Clone Wars. And they're like, oh, Netflix. And I'm like,
Right.
yes. Like, and like, how is that not a good thing? Like,
Right.
I understand the desire for some people to have everything wrapped up neatly in a film, but if everything that was important in a film, then we wouldn't have books and we wouldn't have this larger
Right.
expanded universe. And I don't think you can want an expanded universe but also not want that to bleed over into the films at all. It can't
Well,
just be a one way thing.
I think my argument to that is, what is Solo if not an expanded universe movie?
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
Like, it's not an episode 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. It's a Star Wars story, and I think it's like, I get being upset if you want to be able to watch the main Star Wars line, and like, you don't want to have to watch 5 seasons of a TV show
Right.
to get episode 9. But Solo is not episode 9. Solo is the most expensive expanded universe content we've ever gotten.
Right.
Like, there's a difference to me.
Yeah.
Like, and so in that level, I think it's totally legitimate to put expanded universe stuff in it.
I mean, and I think you're right, and I think it's right there in the name. It's a Star Wars story. It's not
Right.
Star Wars in the sort of strictest sense of episodes, but it's a story about Star Wars, and
Right.
that's exactly what the Clone Wars and Rebels are. Even when the Clone Wars is about characters, who are the characters of the prequel trilogy in a way that Rebels isn't necessarily. I think that's a great way to put it, that Solo is an expanded universe film, and so seeing the rest of the expanded universe there makes sense.
Yeah. Sorry,
but-
I thought I was going to sneeze there for a second, and I went total, like, what's going on?
But I'll also say that I was a hater of the Clone Wars for a long time. I watched that film, and I thought, there's no way I could watch any more of this.
Right.
The same thing that people point to, the Sky Guy and the snips and the R2-y kind of stuff like that.
Right.
That didn't work for me, and I can even point, I think it's the first episode of season 4, when it was still airing. I thought I would give it another chance. I think that was the Gungan Prince episode or whatever.
The Mon Cal Prince.
Yes, yeah, that was it, Mon Cal. And I watched that, and I'm like, oh nope, this is still not for Terry. But
Right.
But the more I watched it, and the more I connected genuinely with fully realized characters, and you see kind of the depth of these stories, like, it's just so good. It's just so good, and I don't understand how you couldn't get into it. I also want to say, there's been some stuff going on in chat that I've not paid attention to.
Yeah, we're kind of behind on chat. Sorry, guys. Leon, who is probably related to Goth Boy, there have been several new Star Wars films announced. We just don't know what they are yet. Rian Johnson has a new film series. The producers behind Game of Thrones are going to do a film series after they're done with Game of Thrones. Jon Favreau has a TV show. Star Wars films that have not been announced include Boba Fett and Kenobi.
Yep. And if you want, we have a handy link. I'm actually gonna look that up and post it in chat because I'm fond of it.
I think it's pretty good.
But yeah, those films have definitely not been announced.
Echo 7 heroes can get their own movies and tie into big picture in smaller amounts like Marvel. I think that's great. Great Canadian guy who's a streamer friend of ours, Janeway, great captain or best captain. I think is that a Star Trek reference?
It is, and Janeway is the best captain, hands down.
There you go. YB's Clone Wars video will make a believer out of a skeptic. Is that my mole one? And I appreciate that. I like that. Latana, who is awesome that you're here. He is the king of Fortnite, if you want to know anything about Fortnite. I would love to see an R2-D2 movie. I mean, I'd watch it.
In important ways, every movie so far has been an R2-D2 movie.
That's true.
At least the episodes.
That's true. I think it'd be funny. As Great Canadian Guy says, can you imagine the script for that? It would be an interesting script.
I love Janeway. See, now this is going to have to be a separate thing on Twitter or something. Because, okay, anyway. Janeway is the best. But, hi, McYagi.
Hey, Yagi, good to see you.
We're deep in Spoiler Town now. So if you've not seen it, then hi for sure. Glad you dropped by. And we'll try not to mention that Jar Jar was Snoke the whole time.
Right.
Um,
Um, when GCG said Janeway, what's sad is the first thing I thought of was Jane's Town, which is an episode of Firefly.
yeah.
That was definitely not what he was referencing, but it's
Yeah.
where my mind went.
And Echo says he wishes that C-3PO and R2 had been in Solo. So why don't we talk about that in a minute, or just
Yeah.
cameos in general? Because my thought last week was that Solo was just going to be string of cameos for 2 hours,
Right.
And it wasn't that. You know, we got the one big cameo, and then we got a couple of other, you know, mentions here and there, but it wasn't full of cameos the way I anticipated, including C-3PO and R2. So what do you think about that?
So I 100% understand wanting 3PO and R2 in the film, because this is now the first film that doesn't have 3PO and R2 in it. And it kind of breaks the tradition. It's just, I don't know of a way to put them in the film that isn't just forced, that isn't literally putting them in there for the tradition of having them in there. So, like, if they had been in the movie, I would have accepted it, because I would have liked that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I can't think of a way where it would have worked to have them there. Now, Anthony Daniels was in the movie.
Right.
Now that Kenny Baker has passed away, he passed away the same year as Carrie Fisher, actually, just a couple of months before.
Mm-hmm.
He is no longer in all the Star Wars movies, but Anthony Daniels is still in every Star Wars movie, which I think is pretty cool.
Right. Did we ever get clarification on what role he played? Because I feel like originally he was one of the Wookiees, and then I heard that he wasn't.
He's the guy with the Wookiees.
Okay.
So when Chewie goes off to, like, help save the Wookiees or whatever, you hear a guy that's like, Selwyn, or whatever the Wookiee's name was, like, come this way, and that's Anthony Daniels.
GCG says, how do you respond to the criticism that the film takes away some of Han's character growth by retroactively making him a caring anti-hero instead of becoming one because of Luke and Leia? My feelings is that I assumed even the first time I saw episode 4 that Han was. He was just trying not to be.
Right.
Like, I think Han was always the caring person, and like, he was trying to convince himself that he wasn't because he thought it was cool. Like, even in this movie, when he's talking to Kira at one point, and he's like, I'm an outlaw now. And she's like, no, you're not.
No, you're not. Like, what are you talking about? You're not. Here you are.
Like, she tells him, she says, I know who you are. Like, and to me, that's genuine.
Yeah.
I mean, and sure, I guess people can read it differently. And I think that Leia does change him in a way that is significant and lasting, that's different than what we see in Solo. But I've always thought of him as that person that cares just enough.
Well, I said I don't know if it was my spoiler review, but I said somewhere along the line that, in a way, Han going from the cold-hearted, he shoots Greedo first, he's the mean smuggler, to the guy that would come back and save the rebellion in just A New Hope makes no sense. Like, there's not enough character growth there. But if you put into the context of Solo that he's a dude who's trying to make himself out to be worse than he is, then it starts to make a lot more sense.
Right.
Like, to the point that he's cynical. He's not cynical because he's cynical. He's cynical because every person he's ever cared about, including the woman he loved his whole life, betrayed him.
Right.
And in some ways that makes his game with Leia make more sense. Right. Why is he playing this, like, oh, you really like me, but you don't kind of game? Well, it's like, because he's been in love before. And this is actually kind of an interesting point. I might want to do a full video on this at some point. in the context of Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and I'm going to spoil the end of Leia, Princess of Alderaan if you have any intention to read it, by Claudia Gray. It's really good. But in it, what is it, 16-year-old Leia finds out about the rebellion for the first time.
Right.
And during the course of the movie, she gets her first boyfriend. And her first boyfriend is from another well-to-do family on Alderaan. And he's very prim and proper and very, I'm going to do the honorable thing. And at the end of the book, he betrays Leia because Leia has started to fight for the rebellion, basically. And he doesn't want Alderaan to do that because he correctly, as we find out, doesn't want the Empire to punish Alderaan for fighting for the rebellion. So he's so honorable, he wants to protect Alderaan. Even though he hates the Empire, he doesn't want to fight the Empire because he doesn't want to hurt Alderaan. So what we have is a character who's cut from the same cloth as Leia, comes from a very similar background as Leia, who betrays Leia and what Leia's fighting for whatever his reasons are. And then we have Han and Kira is very much like Han, and they're cut from the same cloth, and they have the same upbringing, the same background, and she betrays him. So I really like this idea that both Han and Leia were madly in love before, and got with somebody who's like them, who then turned on them, and it just makes the opposite attract things so much better than they hate each other, so it means they really love each other, which is so fun to watch, but isn't necessarily how life works. But for their characters, it works so well because they've gone for the quote-unquote right person with all the checks in the box, and it didn't work. And so to me, it makes Han and Leia work so much better knowing what the first round was like for both of them.
I mean, and that adds layers to the I love you, I know stuff and Empire Strikes Back. But, I really like that too, and I hadn't put that together with the Princess of Alderaan book, which is really good. It's probably one of my top 10 easily favorite new canon books. But like I said, so I don't know if you've ever watched Scandal before on ABC. But
I have not.
It's off the air now, so you have to watch it on Netflix if you want to. It just ended. But
I didn't know.
We just started that last week, and I really like it a lot. But the main character in the show, Olivia Pope, she's like this lawyer, this fixer for politicians and stuff. But her big catchphrase is, I wear the white hat. I'm still the good guy at the end of the day. Even though I'm doing all this stuff and helping people do shady things, I'm doing it because I'm a good guy. And, we started watching that last week, and I kept thinking about that during Solo, that as much as he wants to be the outlaw, and as much as he's going against the Empire, and he's not necessarily helping the rebels, I think Han still wants to be the good guy. I think I don't think that's his primary motivation. I think his primary motivation is to get off Corellia and not live on the streets and to have a ship and be able to fly it. But I don't think that he's necessary. For me to have wanted more of a character change would have to mean that he was a worse person to start with than I've ever thought was true of Han Solo. Shooting first or not. And so I don't, at the end, to answer that question succinctly, I don't think this changes that characterization of him for me.
I don't think it does either. And even to the extent that he shoots first in this movie, he shoots first to save his life. I think so many people like the Han shot first argument because they like this idea that Han is this roguish, I'm gonna, take care of myself type.
Right.
But the idea that he shoots first still implies that the other guy was also going to shoot.
Right.
It's not Han only shoots.
Right.
It's Han shoots first. So even the notion that he shoots first, to me, doesn't make him this cold-hearted guy.
I definitely agree with that. And Echo Solo Pirate says that he thought Lando would have come back at the end too. I expected Lando to come back too, but I was
Yeah.
pleased. I was pleased with how that ended.
Yeah, I like how they did it instead. And then we got the Sabak rematch.
And I was actually glad that we got the Sabak rematch. I think that was one of my favorite parts of the film.
Yeah.
One, because it exposes the fact that Han knew Lando cheated the first time.
Yep.
But like it sets up like the whole fair and square thing.
Yep.
When he says, in Empire, hey, I want it from you fair and square. That's like Han
Yeah.
digging at him again. Like, I actually beat you.
I actually beat you at cards. Yeah. I hadn't made that connection, but that's a good one.
But he also says in the chat, he says, I feel that Han really loved Kira in a way that he could never love Leia strongly, but he was hurt so badly that he'll be guarded against close relationships the rest of his life. I think that's probably true.
I think that is, and it makes a lot of sense too, because even reading Last Shot, he still has problems at times being close with people, because he had no problems being close with Kira. That was really the problem.
Right. Another thing I thought we could talk about is, there's just so much to talk about with this film.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's just this popcorn flick, but I thought this was, again, I don't want to be like hyperbolic and clickbaity and say this is the most funny film or the funniest film in Star Wars yet, but I really love the humor in this film. And I don't think it was overdone, and I don't think there were any one particular joke that was over the top the way that I think some people felt the Poe prank call in The Last Jedi was. But it really worked for me on a very satisfying level. What did you think about that, or did you have any moments that stuck out to you?
I completely agree about the humor, but I understand I'm also the type of person that's like never been bothered by MCU humor, so I'm like the worst judge as to whether or not humor is over the top or not. But, my favorite moment is right in the beginning. Han's talking to like the weird worm Lady Proxima, and he has a rock in his hand, and he holds the rock out, and he's like, I'm holding a thermal detonator. And he makes like a clicking noise with his mouth. I just think that's funny. Like, and she's like, "That's a rock. You made a clicking noise with your mouth." Like, she's not even falling for it. And that part just cracks me up to no end. But I think the part I think that most people were worried about was Han getting his name.
Yeah.
Because I know I was worried that, because I knew that was coming. One of the videos I had done, I found a quote by Bob Iger that says we were going to see Han get his name. Mm-hmm. And I was worried that it was going to be done it was going to be the lightsaber toss moment. Right? The moment that was big and important. Like with the saber toss in Last Jedi, I still get why they did it. The way they did it. I don't think it was the best way to do it, but I get where they were going with it. But I was worried it was going to be that way with Solo, but I actually really liked how he got his name.
Right. And I thought it worked well, too, because I don't think it was overdone. Like, it was definitely a joke, and it was like a jokey thing to do.
Right.
But, so I don't know if I've talked about this on one of our videos before, but I know I've talked about it with you before. My problem with the saber toss was not the saber toss, but the kind of the tone that I thought it portrayed. And I didn't have that problem with the name moment. I thought that it did that well in a way that really worked for me. And I'll say too about the thermal detonator scene. When he held up that rock, my first thought was, that's a rock. Right. And then he said, no, it's a thermal detonator. And I'm like, oh, maybe it is a thermal detonator. And then Proxima says, no, it's a rock. And I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
Yep. He's doing a Solo thing.
Right. And even like when he's, like just simple moments, like when they're escaping on the speeder and they're he turns it up on its side to go down that alley and it gets stuck. And then you had the kind of replay of that in the Falcon later on. Like, I don't know. It's just, I thought it was just so well done. as a
Yeah.
film. Um,
I don't think anything was overdone. Anything was
and another thing I was
like,
worried about with the humor was I feel like a lot of comedies these days give you all their best lines in the trailers.
yes.
And I was afraid that might be the case of the humor in Solo too, especially with the, the line about Chewie's age and stuff like that. Um, I was afraid it might go like that route too and show us all the best moments
Yeah.
before, and I didn't feel like that was the case either. Um,
Right. Well, like even to go back to the name thing for a second, and this is something I talked about in my spoiler review. The other thing about that didn't bother me is it's a very real thing, just filling in a last name on a piece of paper like that. Like my great grandparents came from Lebanon,
mhm,
and at Ellis Island, no one could pronounce their last name, so they changed it.
right.
Like that's a thing that happens on Earth. So like the Imperial guy would have just needed a last name to do the form, so he just made one up, and he probably has to do that all of the time because Han is probably not the only. What was the term? Scum rat,
Yeah.
slum rat, something like that. He's probably not the only one that's enlisted, and he's like, all right, well, I got to make up another name today. I mean,
Um,
for all we know, there could be several solos in the galaxy.
right. I mean, and I thought it was interesting too, because I think you're right. I think it probably was a more common thing because he says, "Who are your people?"
Right,
And I thought that was an interesting way of saying it too.
right.
I kind of like that. This is an imperial functionary, and I saw somebody. It may have even been you that pointed this out. The similarity between Rey not having a last name and Han not having a last name,
Yeah.
and both of them wanting to be sort of part of something larger. Um, I like that. I like that too. Um, what do you think? So, Echo Solo brings up the moment in the film where Han was speaking in Wookiee in the
Yeah.
Shiruk. What do you think about that? I love that scene. That
Yeah.
that probably was the biggest laugh for me the whole time, because even with characters who speak Wookiee, we've never seen somebody on camera
Like
speaking it
speak
back.
Wookiee.
Um,
I I I think the only thing that kind of surprised me about I didn't really mind watching him try to speak it. I think I was a little surprised that he just knew how to speak it.
yeah,
Like I guess in my mind he always knew how to do it because he had spent time with Chewie.
hmm
I think it makes sense as a way reason like why Chewie would give Han the time of day.
right,
Um, but like so I don't know. I guess for me, and we were kind of talking about this before the stream, in the same way some people had issue with Rey just knowing how to understand Chewbacca. I'm like, well, how does Han just know how to understand Chewbacca? Unless there was like a Wookiee kid on Corellia where he also kind of learned the language. Or maybe it's like Infinity War and Groot is an elective taught in Asgard. I don't know. Maybe Han just picked it up somewhere.
yeah,
But I don't know. I think that was the only part. It doesn't bother me enough where it's like a fault with the movie for
hmm
me. But I think that was the most jarring thing about it. I thought it was kind of funny.
yeah,
What I liked about it was that it was broken Wookiee, like
right,
Shrill or whatever. Like it's like you and me escape by big battle of pretend, and I was like, what the frick is a battle of pretend? Oh, a fake fight. I
yeah.
get it. Like that, I think is what made it work for me.
Another reason I really like that scene, just really quick, is that it kind of subverted the Star Wars creature moment. Like
Yeah,
it wanted to have a creature moment, but I really liked using mud covered Chewie as the creature moment.
right.
Um, but I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember we were talking to JPD from Port Haven, and he said the same thing. I didn't even make that connection because I think for me, the creature moment was the space octopus.
oh yeah,
Um,
sure.
so I didn't really make the connection that Chewie was the creature moment because I think going into it, I knew the space octopus was going to be there. I was really excited for the space octopus, and I was not let down by the space octopus.
Yeah. I was almost expecting, in addition to the space octopus, those space stingray things from the Clone Wars.
Yeah, yeah.
Not
Or
not the
Ezra
space
show up.
whales. Yeah,
Yeah.
but anyway. But I think we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping it up
Yeah,
for today.
I'm leaking like a faucet over here. No one wants to watch that.
But we've already done a good bit of solo content, and we're gonna have more for you as we kind of continue to digest. And we may do whole other streams devoted to solo.
Solo, yeah.
If you're watching this after the fact, make sure you can always leave questions in the comments. We might get back to that, or you can shoot us stuff on Twitter, that kind of stuff. If there's something specific, if you have ideas for videos about solo or things that you would like to get our comments on in a video, send us that kind of stuff too. We want to. We enjoy making content, but we want to make content that you want to enjoy along with us. And I promise I will eventually make more videos that don't involve me singing. But if you're not already, make sure that you're plugged into Port Haven on all the things. We're on Twitter and Facebook. You're here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Check out our forums. And if there's not much else, I think we'll just see you next week, guys.
Yeah, I get sorry guys. One of these days I'll be healthy again and it'll be better.
But do a back to tank somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Just slide in there and just the back to tank would become a snot tank and that'd be pretty gross.
But anyway, check us out. We'll be back with you next week.
Yeah, catch you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Janeway's the best captain.